My name is Andrew Van Buren, and I'm here today to introduce to you a magician, illusionist, performer, and also illusion builder and creator called Fred Van Buren. He toured the world with his own illusion shows, and he actually started in show business in the 1940s. He went on to perform with Connie Greta, and that's right, it's my mum and dad. Now, ladies and gentlemen, out of all the illusions he built, the most famous is the vanishing motorbike and rider, and all with the principle that everything that he performed and invented, just like myself, have to be performed in the round. They all have to be performable in a circus ring, cabaret floor, or anywhere, even in the middle of a field. And so, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce to you, talking about his great friend and the relationship with Bob Harbin, ladies and gentlemen, Fred Van Buren.
My connection with Robert Harbin basically goes back to my connection with Albert Savine. And how that came about, my connection with Albert, was very strange. In 1962, they changed their name from the Amazing Yoxanis to Van Buren and Greta. And they said, when you open your mouth, you talk like a North Country comedian, so we want you to go Dutch, which I wasn't happy about, but that was the way show business worked then. And I'm booked for a week's variety at the Floral Hall, Scarborough, a Dutch week. And on the bill was Albert Savine. And on the Monday night we go in and start performing, doing our normal act, but of course in Dutch costume. And Albert Savine stood in the wings watching us. Not fine. Then Tuesday night we're working again and he's standing in the wings again. And this went on till when I said to Connie, Greta, I said, I don't know why he's watching our act like this. He's got a good, marvellous act himself. And he came over to us Wednesday night and he said, I've been watching you act. I said, I've seen you. He said, you've a marvellous act there. He said, where do you live? I said, we live in a place called Sandbach in Cheshire. Oh, you don't live in London then? I said, no. He said, if you come and live in London with an act like you've got, you'd make a fortune on the banqueting scene. Well, we didn't know there was a banqueting scene. So, cut a long story short, Albert persuaded us to go and live in London, which we did. And Albert put us in touch with quite a few of the big bookers. In fact, regularly we were in Grosvenor House and the Savoy and place, and we'd never known about all this. And then they persuaded us to join the Concert Artists Association. And would we go and do a Sunday night show so that they could see what we were all about. And I was informed that Harbin had been in, seen what we were about. I think Albert had told him about being a wonderful magic act. And the next thing, we were contacted by Bob Harbin and said, I've seen you working, marvellous act. But he said, after seeing that vanishing radio, my God, I'm not going to perform mine ever again. And that was my first conversation and meeting up with Bob Harbin. We became quite close friends through Albert Savine, who was managing us and then eventually took over managing Bob Harbin, which we had a wonderful relationship. And I mean, in those days, there was Billy McComb, Harold Taylor, and that. We were working the banqueting scene, and none of us did the same effects. We didn't copy one another, and it was a wonderful thing because we could follow one another in, knowing we would be completely different. And in fact, Albert looked after Bob Harbin for quite some time. In fact, it was Albert who put him in with P&O on the cruise ships, which was a wonderful thing because as he was getting older, he wanted to slow off a bit, and on the cruise ships it was ideal for him and Dolly. And they emptied a cabin so he could put all his props in, and he was completely away on the cruise ships. Now, in 1965, I'm doing a summer season with Roy Hood, and I get a telegram to go to London Pavilion Chambers, and I wondered what it was all about, and basically I met Disney and Tom Arnold, and they were going to put on Snow White and Seven Dwarfs on ice, and Disney said, "I believe you make all your own equipment, Mr. Van Buren." I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Well, that's wonderful," he said, "and I want a fire in this effect and scene." I said, "Well, I don't do fire eating, Mr. Disney." He said, "I don't want fire eating, I want an illusion with fire." And so he said, "Think about it, go away, and if you come up with the idea that I like, you'll get the contract to appear in Mr. Tom Arnold's show that he's putting on of my story of Snow White and Snow White." Well, of course, I came up with the idea of flames to flowers and flowers to life, and that's how the world began, with a ball of flame and then the vegetation, and Disney liked that, and I got the contract, which was wonderful. And so for 10 weeks that Christmas we performed on ice at the Empire Pool, Wembley, and Peter Warlock and his wife Anne came in. They asked to see us after the show, came round, they said, "Wonderful act, we've not come across you before. You're not a member of the IBM or the Circle or anything?" I said, "No, I'm not." And he persuaded me then to join the IBM. And of course eventually they got me to join the Circle. And Harbin and I were in regular contact over things. He liked the idea of me building stuff and that, and after working for 12 months on the ice show, we decided, Connie Greta, to invest in another business. Still keep show business going, which had grown up in from a youth, and we decided to invest in a big hardware DIY business, and then I could have the workshop to build my props better in, and so on. And we settled in Newcastle under Lyme and in the potteries. And while we settled, the Mercian mystics asked me if I'd become president for them. So I said, "Well, if I can help you, I will," and I did. And they said they wanted to raise funds, so I said, "Well, we'll put a show on. We'll put a magic show on." And so that transpired. I said, "And I'll get my friend Bob Harbin to come." He said, "You can get Harbin." I said, "Well, we've had a long association with Bob Harbin from our days in London." And I contacted Bob, and he said, "Yeah." I said, "And we'll put you up in a hotel, but you can come and spend the day with us at Silverdale," which him and Dolly did. And we chatting away, because I'd asked him specifically to do Experiment 13, which I rather liked. I'd seen him do it on television, and I rather liked Experiment 13. And he said, "Well, I'll do it if you'll get Connie Greta to stand in for me." So I said, yes, she would. And I said, "Well, why aren't you keen on it, Bob?" As we sat in our lounge, he said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "It's just something about it." I said, "Well," he said, "they're just wooden rods." I said, "Well, why don't you put them in as fluorescent light tubes?" "Oh," he said, "I can't go down that road." He said, "Listen, if you can sort that out, have a go at it. You have my blessing." I said, "Well, that's wonderful." And it wasn't easy to put together, but we did. But then was the headache of lighting them all from one end, and also housing the starters and so on, because in those days fluorescent light tubes were far different than how they are today, and we had to overcome all that. But fortunately I'd got some good friends who were technology people at Keele University who came and made a few suggestions, and we experimented until we got the method of lighting it all from one end. And so I built it, and was quite happy with it, and we were still doing shows. And then we went to Southend to do a variety show with Charlie Chester, and I put it in for the very first time, and it went down well, and of course again it was something different, and we did actually do it for the Magic Circle, because we'd become then members of the Magic Circle, and John Solis wanted us for the Christmas show.
Felixstowe in
1976, that's
yeah.
right. We just finished a season with Windsor Davies and Donna Stell at Felixstowe, and that's when I came up with the vanishing motorbike idea. And John Solis said, well, we'd love you to do 2 spots, do a normal magic spot, as you do in Illusions, and then do a separate spot with a vanishing motorbike, so which we agreed. And then when we'd finished the collegiate show, we went and did a television show at Caesar's Palace on the Sunday night after, for the television. But on that bill was a guy called Jim Summers, and he must have measured up my prop, and evidently years later I found out that he'd copied it and built it, but that's the way things were going in them days, sadly. It is sad, because looking back, as I said, on our early days of Billy McComb and Harold Taylor and all of us, we had ethics and courtesies, and we respected one another and for what we were doing. And
well, the Jim Summers version, he directly copied your fluorescent light tube penetration illusion.
Yeah, different one said he'd measured it up backstage at the Collegiate Theatre,
and then
the Magic Circle
went
show.
back to America, and a few years later he'd completed it and then claimed to have invented it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's very sad. But going back to Bob Harbin, he was pleased with what I'd achieved with it, and when he put the book out, he said, "I'm going to send you a book." I said, "Well, you know, Andrew's coming up." He said, "I'll tell you what, I'll autograph it to Andrew," which he did, and we have now in our possession number 6 book, and it's addressed to Andrew, and it's put in, "I knew and admired your father and mother," which is a lovely comment. But we've got a lot in common, basically, Bob Harbin and myself. And talking of Windsor Davies and Donna Stell at Felixstowe in 76, 77, we were booked with the same company to close the first half of the show. Ironically, Bunny Barron, who put the show on, he didn't want the vanishing motorbike. We were finishing then with our substitution trunk, which we were quite famous for, but then we transformed the substitution trunk, which again was examined by 2 members of the audience, transformed it into a water garden with fountains gushing up and what have you, and Bunny Barron loved that. So we didn't do the vanishing motorbike at Hastings, but on the way back from Hastings, David Nixon contacted us, and would we do the fluorescent light tubes on his show. And ironically, it was one of his last shows on that last series he did before sadly he died. And coming from Hastings, we popped into Twickenham and presented the fluorescent light tube. That was in September 1977.
And Norm Nielsen was on that show.
That's
as
right,
well.
Norm Nielsen with the violin, a wonderful American magician.
You nor I've ever worked the zigzag.
No, we wouldn't. He said, after seeing your vanishing radio, I said, well, after seeing your zigzag, and that I'm not, and I never did the zigzag. We did our own thing, and.
But Bob did a lot of publishing, whereas you concentrated on...
Oh yeah, I just interested in being a performer, showman, and maker of my own effects. And we did everything our way, like so many of the creation which formulated from what Disney wanted, fire to flowers, flowers to the girl, which we called a creation. And
but with Bob, you were both got on very well with each other because you worked the same circuit in London, but also you spoke the same language regarding building illusions.
Oh yes. I mean, when he come up here to Silverdale, to our home, he always used to say, "You've got this fabulous workshop here. he said, I build all my props on the garage floor. And I said, well, instead of investing in property, Bob, why don't you invest in a damn good workshop, you know? But that's the way we were. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful relationship with Bob Harbin. And well, that's the story of him coming up and giving me permission to make experiment 13 into the fluorescent light tube illusion. And it was all discussed in our lounge that day when he come up to perform for me for the Mercian Mystics in 1974. Yeah.
And the other thing with all of it is, with the illusions and the fluorescent light tubes, it's amazing how that principle of a fluorescent light tube being used as opposed to a bulb has now been evolved into so many other things, because you've got the situation of Jim Summers stealing the effect, but then it was turned into Luminaire 13, and then from then the technology went into the three-pronged fluorescent light tube penetration, and I think Osborne published a version, and it galloped from there, really.
This is how they were. What it was wonderful for me. Sadly, when he died, I was away again on tour, and but an other good friend, Alan Saxon, he was looking at, because they were living in London at the time, and I'd come up north. But Alan Saxon, of course, looked after him when he died, and Alan and I were very, very good friends. In fact, Alan and Andrew to perform for the IBM at Great Yarmouth, when Andrew presented the fluorescent light tubes, and there was a round of applause as the girls walked on with the prop. Yeah, that was amazing, really. But wonderful memories, wonderful memories. But they were wonderful days, and Harbin was very much a gentleman, as a lot of the performers were in them days.